Frank Herbert. Every question that could have ever been asked of you has probably been asked.
Ask me a new one.
But I'm gonna I'm gonna go back to the beginning and maybe a little beyond, to the real genesis of DUNE and where it started for Frank Herbert, the author. Not necessarily where it began as a project, as a book, but where it began for you, for Frank Herbert.
Well, I'm a history buff and have been a history buff since I was quite young. And while reading history, I got the idea that we had not looked at the messianic impulse in human society from a point of view that I knew could be developed. Reporting that this person came on the scene and these people followed and this is what happened was a kind of a journalistic approach to it. I didn't mind the you are there approach, but what I wanted was something that showed the impact of a Messiah on history as the creator of a power structure. Because inevitably, no matter how good the Messiah, other people enter the scene. Other people are attracted to the power structure. I think that the idea of power corrupting and absolute power corrupting absolutely is not on the mark, does not hit it. I think what happens is that power attracts the corruptible.
That's an interesting concept. In fact, that's almost the antithesis, the reverse of the process that's commonly accepted.
I think this is why great power centers such as the Kremlin, the Pentagon, Kedrosi, Sandhurst become essentially cesspools, really, because they get so many people there who want power for the sake of power. And it's my estimation of it that a high percentage of these people are certifiable. You get real nuts. This is why you get people, for example, going to Guyana and drinking Kool-Aid, because the errors of the leader are amplified by the number who follow without question. That was the beginning. I wanted to do a Messiah story that explored this.
The way that you perceived power structures at that time and wanted to make a statement about it is this: you mentioned just a moment ago that a Messiah can create or develop a power structure.
It occurs around the Messiah.
That's what I guess my question is. Does the Messiah walk in, sometimes even inadvertently, to a culture or a society who has already built a power structure?
Every Messiah I've studied in history was a reformer, and for good reason. Jesus wanted to reform the rabbinate. He had a belief that it had become corrupted. The rabbinical movement had become corrupted. The same is true of Muhammad. He was a reformer. Zoroaster was a reformer. Each of these individuals obviously was charismatic. Charismatic leaders are dangerous because people don't question them. They see the obvious thing that the charismatic leader is saying, that this needs reforming. So they fall into line behind the charismatic leader. And as I say, even if the charismatic leader is absolutely right and perfect in all of his judgments, eventually you get a power structure which accumulates like filings accumulating in a magnet all around the polarized places in this power structure.
So the power structure does evolve as a result of the Messiah's activities.
That's right. But not just the Messiah's activities. It evolves because of the way people respond to a charismatic leader. So it's part of the forms of our society, you see.
But in the case of Jesus, you mentioned a moment ago, weren't the Hebrews waiting for a Messiah long before?
Oh yes, the messianic myth was there
preceded his arrival.
In their history, yes.
Of course, he never really exemplified the Messiah.
Of course, there's some question whether he said he was the Messiah. Buddha was a reformer. See, and Jesus was a reformer. In each instance, you have an individual on the scene, a charismatic leader, who sees something that needs fixing. There's a repair job necessary.
Something that's obvious to everyone.
Yes, and a lot of people say, yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Charismatic Leader, and we will follow you.
There's a broad truth to
Yes.
anything that's said, so it's easy to follow.
And then you get a movement going.
This is sequential. These things happen.
But they don't happen just because of the charismatic leader. They happen because the society picks up on it.
But the society had created a need or a void for the charismatic leader before that individual arrived?
Something had occurred in the society that the charismatic leader latches onto.
Now, please turn the cassette over to continue.
The stage is set prior to the Messiah's arrival.
That's right.
Do societies truly create the Messiahs from within?
Oh, I think so. Mm-hmm. I think that that we kind of create a vortex into which the Messiah is sucked. People ask me if I'm starting a cult, and I avoid that like the plague. I don't want to be a cult leader. I'm not your guru. You be your own guru.
Is that why you shaved your beard?
This is the new Frank Herbert. We do nasty things to our leaders. We shoot them in the streets of Dallas and hang them on pieces of wood at Golgotha. The whole structural form out of which charismatic leaders evolve, that's the thing that I was addressing.
But the process starts, and you were referring a moment ago to what happens next.
Yeah.
The leader evolves, the leader emerges, and then things begin to happen.
Well, remember that DUNE, DUNE Messiah, and Children of DUNE were one book in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And DUNE Messiah was a pivotal book which turns over the whole picture, changes your view of history. This is why a lot of people had trouble with it, you see. Because I had created a charismatic leader, you would follow Paul for all of the right reasons. He was honest, trustworthy, loyal to his people, up to the point of giving his life for them if they wanted it.
And the response to him?
The response to him was to follow him slavishly, to not question him. I think, for example, that John Kennedy was the most dangerous president we've had in recent years. Not because I think the man was evil. I think he was a great guy, and I'd have enjoyed drinking with him and playing cards with him. But because people did not question him.
So you are obviously a proponent of questioning authority.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you consider yourself an iconoclast?
Indeed.
With the relationship between the Messiah and the followers, again, I want to go back to the process. It all begins well, and it all seems very good.
Sweetness and light.
And then something happens, or something begins to evolve.
A new structure evolves, and people take it over. Other people get into the act.
So they drain power away from the Messiah.
Of course.
After they...
It is delegated.
And how does that happen?
It happens out of a structural force that is in the society. And I think one of the best examples we have of that in recent times that we can look at with a certain degree of historical clarity is what happened in the Soviet Union. The October Revolution had real evils to address. The Tsarist regime was one of the most evil regimes that this world has ever seen.
The oppression was obvious?
Yeah. Marx and the others came in and filled that into that vortex and took it over. Now, what has evolved out of that? They have evolved a bureaucratic aristocracy, which is almost a precise copy of the Tsarist regime.
And this might have contributed to the fall of Nikita Khrushchev. He was the last singular identity as a human being that I recall in the Soviet Union. Since then, the power has filtered down, broadened, and diffused. So that is the process that will take place in any similar situation?
I think so.
Human nature?
I don't think it's human nature. Human nature is involved in it, of course. But I think it is an essential part of the forms that people develop and call government.
Which they create for themselves.
Yeah. It's a kind of an evolutionary process, I believe, that has come out of tribal forms. A feudatory is a tribe. So we have this marvelous historical example. It's happened in our lifetimes in the Soviet Union. We have seen them reconstitute the Tsarist regime.
Without an individual
Yeah.
on which to focus.
But all of the bureaucracy is there, you see. Even with some of the same names, same titles, I mean.
So Paul, in Dune,
Is caught in this kind of a vortex.
now, did Paul come to a society seeking that Messiah?
He came to a society that was prepared to welcome a Messiah.
So his reception was favorable,
Oh, yes.
and he was launched not only on his own initiative and ambition, if he had that
The
much
necessities
initiative and
of
ambition,
his decision-making were obvious.
and the society lifted him quite willingly to where he ended up.
That's correct.
Everything else that you created, you were described once, I know, as a world maker. Let me rephrase that. Maybe a world dreamer. You obviously had to create this world of Dune. It began with Paul. It began with this messianic impulse, the study, the interest that you had as an individual, as a writer, and then the rest. How did it grow outward from that?
The first thing you have to do is to create the Messiah, the charismatic leader that people will follow for all of the correct reasons. They can justify everything they do to follow him, and you accept it as a reader. Then we have Dune Messiah, which is the evolution of the power structure, and how devolution begins to set in. And you get the cynicism arising, and you get a turnover of things that were good in Dune that now you get a different look at. You look at them from a different angle.
Does the
You get
perspective
prescience.
change?
Well, the perspective does change. The angle of view changes. Prescience, which figures so prominently in Dune. And I'm talking to a society which believes that prediction is a great thing. But if I were to give you an absolute prediction, John, of everything that's going to happen to you from this moment till the moment of your death, your whole life would be instant replay and an utter bore.
And yet that's your role.
Yeah, but that's the thing people think they want. But what they really want is they want to know what U.S. Steel is going to do on the big board next week. And will she or won't she? And give me a couple of winners at Hialeah while you're at it, you see.
But isn't it this tremendous response that you've received from your writing based upon that eagerness? People wanting to know? People wanting a window to the future?
Oh, yes. But you see, it's the future that is in question. The value of surprise gets thrown out the window if you believe in absolute prescience.
Now you've created a future. As we
Yeah.
said, you're a world maker, a world dreamer. Why did you create Dune? Why that planet? Why such an arid, lifeless place?
Well, it's a testing place, for one thing. And all of the great religions that we know about came out of the wilderness. So I created a kind of an amplified wilderness.
How much of this then, of your work, of your writing, of all the writing that you've done, the science fiction writing that you've done, how much of that is a reflection of you and your beliefs as you perceive this planet and our social structures?
Well, I think we have to reform our social structures. I really do. And I have certain metaphors in the Dune books that I deliberately chose to shape people's view of the forms. For example, the worms. The worms are the monster, the mindless monster in the depths that guards the pearl of great price. It is the unconscious animal. It's the black bull of the corrida. You see?
It limits your options of how to deal with it.
Yeah. It is the welling of violence that comes out of humankind.
So in describing or creating a wilderness, then you're exposing elements. Again, I go to the phrase human nature, elements of the human condition. I noticed that it's very humanoid. The future remains very humanoid.
I want to real people that you would identify with.
and also that they respond in many ways in a very consistent fashion to what we experience now. There's a tremendous amount of conflict in your writing. Many things are resolved by conflict. Now, is that a prediction of the future, or is that then, as you said, the metaphor, the reflection of the now?
That's the way I read history. If you read history, isn't that the way human beings have done since we began chiseling our words in stone?
And as it has been, then it will continue to be.
Unless we change the forms. Now, I don't want to breed out or condition out of humankind the competitiveness, because we're a universe which can throw surprises at us despite our predictions, despite our best predictions. And we have to be able to respond to this universe with all of our options open. We don't close off any options. If we can respond non-violently, that of course is preferable. But if all that's left to us is violence, then we dare not close off that option.
You seem to be implying that we have the ability to change a legacy of the ages, that we can actually attempt and perhaps succeed at something that mankind has failed to accomplish since the beginning of mankind. Do you really have that much faith in the resiliency and the elasticity of the human form?
Yes, I think we're the best equipped survival animal that this planet has ever produced. I don't depend just on rationality. I depend on the need to survive, on the urge to survive, on the desire to survive as a species. This is behind a lot of what I write. It pleases me to think that 20,000 years in the future, 20 million years in the future, there will be human beings around enjoying life the way I enjoy life.
The World Without War Council.
Oh yes, as a member of the Collegium of the World Without War Council, I have bowed out of active participation, although not out of belief in that kind of work. I think that we can't address this problem of war unless we address our own bureaucratic tendencies, our tendencies to create a structure such as the World Without War Council, which then becomes much more interested in maintaining its own form, its own identity, the ongoing need for its services, rather than to create an organization, a form, which puts itself out of business.
How does this dedication to peace manifest itself in your writing?
Showing people some alternatives, showing them the consequences of violence, displaying alternative forms, showing them how the old patterns repeat themselves.
You describe, well, you have many emperors in your writing. Now, as a reflection of the 20th century, for example, what do you see as the preferable leadership, a style of leadership, an evolution of leadership?
Well, my own response politically is that I vote against anybody in office. I think that we've had the examples of how to deal with political power, and that is to give it very briefly.
Why is it that in your writing, when there are 1,000 emperors, or when leadership is broken down and bisected, you reference that, I think, as the Dark Ages?
All I'm saying there, John, is that the aristocratic forms repeat themselves. Aristocracy is a repetitive structure in our world.
More of a bad thing doesn't improve it.
That's what I'm saying, yes.
You talk about religion, and you take perspective
another power
on religion.
structure.
Very much so. You also talk about the inside and the outside, about creating a need for your own leadership.
Right.
How is that manifested in our own society?
We see organizations develop which work unconsciously, for the most part, to maintain those conditions which require their services.
And it's subconscious?
I think mostly unconscious, yes. That all of these structures, these organizations, become much more career-oriented, much more oriented on maintaining the need for their own services and their own ongoing participation in power.
Is it a natural process, for example, that bureaucracy begets bureaucracy?
I think it's self-seeding, yes.
And then how can that be broken? Or can it be broken of its own will?
I think you need to break it by bringing the final judgment, the final determination on who holds power back into the hands of what we like to call the grassroots. I would like to see, in the United States, for example, some real democracy. I would like to see review committees with enormous power, very short-term tenure, maybe 1 year, small budgets, and never able to serve again on such a committee, only once in a lifetime. I would like to see such review committees called into action automatically, given certain conditions. Declaration of war, for example. At a local level, if a school board is going to spend, say, $200,000, automatically a review committee called into being and called at random from the polls of the people who voted in the previous election, and give them the power of life and death over what the school board wants to do. Will they do it? Will they always act perfectly? No, they won't. But if they only have tenure for a year, then you can go at it again. And you will go at it having learned something from the actions of the previous review committee.
Is this an extension of the existing set of checks and balances that we currently
It's another
employ?
check and balance that I would like to reinstall into our democratic system.
But much more localized.
Oh, not only localized. I would like to have it at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level.
In broad terms, are you supportive of diffusing a large centralized power source?
Oh yes,
like
in
a federal
broad
government?
terms I am. I think we need certain central powers, but I think we have to limit the tenure of whoever holds that power, and severely limit it, and so it's arbitrary. They can only, for example, I think that we ought to have one-term senators and maybe two-term congressmen, and that we ought to have a one-term president, maybe give him 6 years, and that senators ought to be 4 years and 1 term, and congressmen maybe 2 terms, 2 years.
Wouldn't that much activity, coming and going in political office, create a volatile state of affairs for a society?
I think that it would demand that the society keep its eye on what was happening, and that's what we don't have now.
In DUNE, going back to the book, going back to how that is reflected in your writing, you have, of course, the tribal
The Fremen.
entity, the Fremen, responding as a tribe, responding primitively.
But quite sophisticatedly, too.
What effect would your suggestions have on a society? It would obviously not tend to become more primitive and more basic in its decision making. It would have to become much more enlightened, I would think.
We have to be much more aware of what's going on. I had a senior bureaucrat in the school system in the state of Washington when I expounded this idea to him. He said, "You think some damned housewife could understand the complexities of what the school board has to do?" And my response immediately is, yes, you bet I think a housewife would understand them. She would understand these things out of necessity. I think if you throw the responsibility, the full responsibility onto people, they rise to the occasion.
Back to Frank Herbert as the writer, obviously very politically aware and tremendously sensitive to political and social issues. That was the basis then for DUNE,
Well, remember
all of DUNE.
Remember, before writing DUNE, I was the speechwriter for a United States senator with 2 offices in Washington, D.C. I've been right on the inside of the apple, so I know what's going on back there. I am a political animal, and I've really never left journalism. I'm writing about the current scene. The metaphors are there. I'm writing about the political ecology, the religious ecology, the social ecology, and the physical ecology of our world. And I think you do not separate any one part of this from the others. You don't separate mind and body and understand the human being. And therefore you don't separate any of these elements and understand what's going on in our world. We fondly say that in the United States we separate church and state. That's an asinine statement. There's nothing more emotional than religion. Nothing more emotionally demanding than religion. Because it is the promise of survival. You can't take that out of politics. You get heated emotions aroused. I am a political animal, and that's what I'm writing about. I'm writing about the economic ecology, the politics of all of these things that influence our lives.
The response that you get to your writing, the way people mirror your writing back to you, is it satisfactory?
Oh yes, people are thinking and asking interesting questions because of what I write.
You're impacting then your readers the way you want to.
Oh yes.
And you continue to.
I hope so.
And you have a new book in the spring called Chapter House Dune.
That's right.
Where is that going to take
us? It's the 6th Dune book, and it begins with a Bene Gesserit planet which is being converted into another Dune, and goes from there.
Thank you very much, Frank Herbert, for sharing your thoughts on Dune, your writings, and sharing your thoughts on our world with Walden Books. We wish you the best of luck with the motion picture, Dune, soon to be released, and look forward to Chapter House, Dune.